Okay, here we have a new tool day. It is a mitre gauge from O'Skool Tools for my table saw. So it's a mitre gauge with an extension fence to upgrade the stock mitre gauge that I have on the Bosch contractor saw. Very nice, very good quality extruded aluminium fence with the extensions. That is the handle and fittings. There is an adhesive backed tape measure. A flip down stop. The mitre gauge that runs in the slot in the saw. So there is a runner bearing, and there appears to be crushed down washers that can tighten it in the slot. First impressions, it's good quality. Looks to be mostly aluminium parts. Good quality, feels sturdy, and yeah, let's get this thing put together and see what it's like in the saw. Okay, so the bearing or washer, whatever you want to call it, on the bottom is designed for track saws that have a T-slotted shape groove. So if you don't have a T-slot and it's just a standard kind of channel, you just remove that. The Bosch GTS model though does have that, so that has to run along there. So then the next step is you've got some side to side wiggle here, and you've got 3 crush washers that just need to be tightened up to take any slop left and right out of the mitre in the track. So you just they provide you with 2 Allen keys. One is sized for these. So you just tighten those up and the washer expands, taking up any slop that's in the mitre slot itself. And to be fair, that's actually a really good job. There's almost nothing in it now, which I would say any issues thereafter is probably more in the Bosch, in the slot itself, as it's kind of beveled. There's a bevel here which probably doesn't help. If it was square finished it might be better. So the next step is to check how square the fence is going to be to the actual blade in the saw. So wind up the blade fully. And take an accurate square. Now I have a DeWalt contractor square that I know is pretty decent, but I mean, if you were going to go down the road of getting cabinet maker tools, like you would get a square that is much more accurate, but this is pretty good in fairness, so I'll go with this for now. It's my biggest square I have to be able to check this, and I can dial it in anyway after the fact by actually, you know, doing the 5-cut method if I was really pedantic about it. So what I'm looking to do is place my square on the fence of the mitre gauge, bring it over to the blade, but not put pressure on the blade so that it would deflect. And I'm lining up the actual tooth of the blade, because the tooth of the blade will stick out further than the actual body of the blade itself. And I'm going to line up there, and I can see that I have possibly a millimetre in it. So there's a second Allen key that's provided, and there are 4 Allen head bolts on the back of the fence, and we just and they are in slotted holes, so the fence is slotted, so we just loosen those 4. And then we hold onto our square, line it up, and I can see that I need to come back on this line a touch. It is very minute. The saw is plugged out, by the way, and safe to put my hand near the blade. Pretty good there. Tighten back down the bolts. One last check. To my eye, that is pretty bang on. Look at, like I say, we can dial it in with some cuts after the fact. So that's setting up the mitre gauge in the slot and squaring up to your blade. So the next step now is to deal with the extruded aluminium fence installation, and also setting up the tape measure on it. Okay, so I've done the tricky bit without recording because my little brain can't multitask. But basically, the adhesive backed tape, it comes with 2 cut lines. So first off, you trim the excess on one end of the tape, and then you start with this inner tube, and you measure in 34.5 millimeters on the end here, and you start to apply that tape at the 90 centimeter, 900 millimeter mark, and you apply that adhesive tape on the inner tube first. That centers the tape on this tube. You then take the smaller section of the fence and you fit the inner tube, and you line up the end of the tape there, the 90 centimeter mark, with that, and you use the 2 machine screws to tighten it up. That lines up these 2 together perfectly. You then put the 2 together. Make sure your joint here is nice and square, that when you've tightened up these 2 machine screws, that it's not kicked one way or the other, because it will throw your measurement out by a millimeter, because you'll end up with a gap where the 2 mating faces haven't butted up together snugly. You then tighten in the lever. Okay, so these are now together. You then take the second half of the tape and you trim off the excess on the end. Now it gives you a 1 millimeter excess line, that's where you trim to. So instead of it being 55, it's actually 551. It's a millimeter. You then start at the very edge here and you apply the adhesive tape across the entire top of the fence, and that should finish up perfectly on the other end. Then that's how you know you're right. You then take a nice sharp blade. I used a spare Stanley blade just for accuracy, and you cut the tape right on the joint. Okay, so that's the adhesive tape there. Now, next step is to attach the fence to the mitre gauge. So we have these slots here and a T-track at the back here. So we have a couple of knobs, 2 T-bolts, and we should have 2 black nylon washers. Seem to be missing one in the pack, so the only thing I have is normal washers, so we're just going to have to go with that for now, and I'll have to get a nylon washer. So we just slide the bolts into the back of the T-track, line them up here. We then put our washers on the back of the bolt and tighten up the knobs. That's that, and then we have the flip stop, and again flip stop, knob, nylon washer, T-nut bolt in with the bolt, sit that on top, nylon washer, the knob, tightens down, and that just flips up and down. Then slap the piece on whatever measurement we want. It does come with additional bolts and these kind of flat-headed T-nut shape nuts. You can put a sacrificial timber fence in front of this and mount it on this T-track here, so that's an option as well. If you wanted to have a zero clearance sacrificial fence out here where you can cut through, you can attach that, so it does come with additional nuts and bolts for that purpose. But that's all intents and purposes the fence built. It is very good build quality, very happy with that now. It is definitely a worthwhile upgrade. So the next step now is to calibrate the measurements to the blade. That's the kind of final step in the process, and this thing is ready to rock and roll then. Okay, so the last thing to do is to calibrate the measurements on the fence to the blade position. So to do that, you bring the fence up to the blade, and align the tooth, and basically you set the fence with a 1 millimeter gap between the fence and the tooth of the blade. Tighten that down, and that should be it set. Now, I don't know, that seems quite close to the blade for my liking, but that's what the instructions say. So the next thing to do then is to do a test cut. So to bring in the stop and set it at a measurement on the scale that we want to test out. and to basically cut a piece of timber, and that's good enough. We'll use this piece. Do a test cut, measure it, see that it all works out, dial it in. That is pretty bang on. So that's now set up, set correctly, dialed in, very good. So we can then release the knob and extend this out. And so the gauge here is 2 directional, so this can be flipped and used on this side of the fence as well. So the tape measure actually does work both sides. So we can actually have our stop out on the extension piece and then extend this out to a set dimension. Just noticing that now it's gets a bit heavy. We have the T-track piece in here, but we don't have one on the back. A second one on the back would stop that from popping up, so that's a little bit disappointing now, but look, it's not the end of the world really. We're going to be holding that anyway. We're going to be holding our piece, holding this when we're using it anyway, so it's not so bad. I suppose the next thing to check is that it actually cuts exactly 90 degrees. So I'm going to get a nice large piece of timber now, plywood possibly, and do a cut and just check how good it is for 90 degrees. So we'll do that. Well, you can see that now, but that is pretty good. There might be a very slight touch in it, but I think I'll need to do some more test cuts really to check that out, but that's not bad at all. Not bad at all. So yeah, that's it. That's the O'Skool Mitre Gauge table saw upgrade for my Bosch table saw, contractor table saw. Very well made. Not too bad to get it set up. I think taking the time to set up the tape is the most important thing there, really, and then just the tape and actually calibrating for square. So I can now do a couple of test cuts, and if I think I needed tweaking, I can just undo the Allen head bolts that are at the back and just give it a touch here or there and dial that in even further. That's it. Yeah, I'll do a follow-up on this maybe once I put it through the paces. Maybe I've got some box making miters and various things coming up, so this will come in handy. Yeah, that's it.